Why was she the only one not called by name? The voices around the long steel briefing table rattled with confidence, clipped tones of officers, planners, commanders mapping out an operation that could decide dozens of lives. Maps glowed under the dim red light, hands stabbed at coordinates, and code words floated like ash in the stale air. And yet, no one looked at her. She sat at the edge of the table, silent, unacknowledged, as if she was just furniture. Her knuckles rested white against her knee, pressed too tightly, the only sign she hadn't slipped into stone. Inside, though, a storm circled. She could hear her own pulse louder than the commander's voice. It wasn't anger that rose in her. It was something colder, something familiar. She had been here before. The operation was dangerous. A rural compound on the edge of the mountains, far from roads, far from help. Hostages rumored inside. A network they had hunted for years, now gathered like vultures in one place. Every face at the table carried the weight of strategy, every face except hers. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. When the briefing broke, chairs scraped back, boots thudded against the concrete floor. Men slapped shoulders, muttered about routes, gear, timing. She stood too, but no one met her eyes. She was a shadow drifting behind them, unwanted, unnoticed. And yet, the mission would need her more than any of them realized. She knew why she was there. She knew why she couldn't walk away. Outside the tent, the night air bit sharp. Diesel fumes from the convoy engines mixed with the dust kicked up by restless wheels. She inhaled, slow, steady, forcing her breath into silence. Above, the sky was an endless black, punctured only by hard stars. She remembered staring at a sky like that once before, different war, different country, same emptiness. A hand brushed her arm. It was Morales, the medic, younger than most, always carrying a grin too wide for places like this. But not tonight. He held a cigarette between two fingers unlit. "You good?" he asked. She gave the smallest nod, nothing more. He studied her, then chuckled softly. "Yeah, you're good, you don't need to say it." He turned the cigarette over in his hand but didn't light it. "Just watch my back in there. I've got this bad feeling." She glanced at him, just long enough for him to see the faintest crack in her mask. A human crack. Then she stepped away, boots crunching gravel, leaving him with his unlit cigarette and his unspoken fears. Inside her chest, though, his words echoed, a bad feeling. The helicopters came before dawn. Their rotors tore the night open, shredding silence into deafening rhythm. She sat strapped into the corner of the bird, rifle across her lap, helmet heavy against her skull. The others talked through comms, checked gear, patted each other on the shoulders like ritual. She stared at the black void outside the open door. Wind roared, engines strained, voices blurred. But her mind carried her somewhere else, back to a dirt road years ago, to a decision that still haunted her. The reason she joined, the reason she couldn't quit, the reason she carried the scars no one could see. Her eyes burned, but she blinked it away. Not here, not now. They landed hard, skids biting rock. Boots hit dirt. Orders snapped through the comms. Stack left, eyes on the ridge. Move. She moved with them, silent, precise. A ghost among louder men. The air stank of dust and cold iron, her lungs filling with the taste of anticipation. And then gunfire. Sharp, sudden, too close. They dove behind boulders, rifles barking back. Sparks cracked off stone. One man cried out, hit in the leg. The medic crawled to him, cursing under his breath. She covered them without hesitation, her scope scanning shadows, her finger steady on the trigger. The fight was brief, a probing skirmish. Whoever had fired melted back into the dark hills, leaving silence heavy and suspicious. "Keep moving," the commander ordered. His voice was tight, shaken. They pushed forward, deeper toward the compound. She felt the weight pressing down, step after step. Something was wrong, something no one else sensed, or maybe they ignored it. At the outer wall, the team stacked again, explosives planted, breath held. The blast shook the night and they surged inside. Rooms cleared, corners sliced, voices shouted in code. Empty. Too empty. Her gut twisted. This wasn't right. She scanned the shadows, her rifle sweeping. Morales was still inside, helping the wounded man hobble forward. Two others searched the far rooms, and then she heard it, faint, muffled, a sound that shouldn't have been there. Crying. Somewhere below them. Her chest tightened. She turned, eyes searching the floor, the walls, until she saw it, scratched boards, too new, covering a stairwell. She crouched, hand brushing the edge, cold metal underneath, a lock already broken. She hesitated. The others hadn't noticed. Orders were still being shouted. Clear, move out, check the north wall. But the sound rose again, crying, weak, fragile, human. Her hand froze on the boards. If she opened it, everything could change. The mission could unravel. Her orders didn't cover this. She should call it in, wait, follow protocol. But her duty wasn't written in orders. It was in the silence of that cry. She pressed her rifle to her chest, lifted the boards and slipped below. The darkness swallowed her whole. The air was damp, heavy with rot. The faint cry echoed off stone walls, leading her deeper. Her boots touched concrete now, not dirt. A basement, a bunker. She raised her light, its thin beam slicing the dark, and what it revealed made her chest seize. Small shapes. Huddled, shackled children. Eyes wide, hollow, faces streaked with fear and hunger. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She swallowed hard, forcing air into her lungs. They looked at her as if she was the first light they'd seen in months. Her comm crackled. "Where are you? Report." She froze. Her hand hovered over the radio. One word and the mission would shift. One word and those children would become targets, burdens, problems. She knew what command would say. She knew what orders would demand. But she couldn't. She lowered the radio. One little girl stretched out a hand, thin, trembling, coated in dirt. The soldier felt her own throat close tight, tears burning hot. She blinked them back, swallowing the storm, forcing herself steady. No one had seen this yet, no one but her. And she knew, deep down, that silence was her only weapon. The silence of the one she would save. Why did no one ever ask what she carried inside? She crouched in the darkness of the basement, breathing shallow, counting heartbeats instead of orders. The children's wide eyes followed every move she made, tiny bodies trembling, clinging to each other like fragile branches in a storm. One girl, maybe 7, had a gash along her cheek. Dried blood crusted along her temple, and her small hand shook as it reached toward her. She swallowed hard. Her own hands were trembling too, despite years of training, despite bullets and death she had seen at distances most could not even imagine. She had saved lives before, but this was different. No enemy target, no call sign, no grid coordinates, just human need, raw and rawer than she had ever felt. "SHH," she whispered, moving slowly. Her hand brushed a boy's hair back from his forehead, the gesture mechanical yet intimate. The silence in the room pressed down, heavy with fear and expectation. She could almost hear the sound of their thoughts, each one a fragile thread of hope tangled in terror. A creak from above snapped her attention to the stairwell. Someone was coming. She froze, every muscle taut. She whispered a single word to the children. "Hide." They scattered into shadows, muffling their breathing, shaking. Her rifle was up, eyes scanning the stairs. Boots hit the concrete above. Voices, male, familiar, command voices. "Something off, clear the basement." "Damn." She ducked behind a support column, heart hammering. The commander's words, crisp and clinical, echoed down. He was giving orders, oblivious to what lay below. She had seconds. Seconds to make a choice. Reveal the children and risk everything, or stay silent and let the command believe the mission was complete. Her jaw clenched. She had never been silent before when people depended on her. But this was survival of a different kind. The footsteps grew louder, Dust kicked into the air with every step. Her fingers itched on the trigger, but she didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, she moved. Small steps, careful, calculated. She guided the children into a narrow alcove unseen. The youngest, no more than 5, clutched her arm with a grip that threatened to tear her skin. She whispered, "It's okay, I'm here, I've got you." The words felt hollow even as they left her mouth. She wanted them to believe her. She had to believe her. Above, the team passed the stairwell. They were focused on the perimeter, the walls, the rooms, anywhere but below. Relief was sharp, fleeting. She exhaled quietly, keeping her shoulders still, her breathing shallow. Then the smallest one whimpered. Her stomach dropped. She crouched, pressed a finger to his lips, and mouthed the word, "Quiet." The moment stretched. Every second felt like a lifetime. The cries from above, the echoes of boots, the distant wind whistling through gaps in the building, everything amplified in her mind. She had been trained to make split-second decisions. This was a decision she could not rehearse, not in any scenario she had ever faced. Her calm crackled softly, static-laced. "Morales," she froze. "Where are you?" his voice asked. Calm, almost hesitant, he must be moving toward the basement. "You okay?" She risked a single breath. Not a word, just a tiny shake of her head. "Not yet." The children huddled closer, some trembling against her, some just staring at her, trust fragile and luminous in the dim light. Their faces were etched into her memory immediately. The wide eyes, the dirt-streaked cheeks, the tiny hands gripping fingers, belts, anything they could reach. She had never encountered fear so raw, so unfiltered. It was her fault, she thought. Not that she caused it, but that she was the one who had to fix it, the one who had to stand between them and the world. She could feel the weight of it pressing down, years of missions, years of silent sacrifices, all converging in this dimly lit room. And she understood something then. No one could ever understand what it meant to make that choice, to bear the cost alone. She moved through the room, guiding, reassuring, her voice low, soothing. She whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "We're going to get out, I promise." But promises, she knew, were fragile things. Her thoughts drifted briefly to home, to a small apartment she had abandoned long ago, filled with photographs she could barely look at anymore. Her parents' smiles, her sister's laugh, a cat she had once loved, everything distant, everything unreachable. She had devoted herself to duty, but duty, she realized, was not just a list of tasks. Duty was choices and sacrifice and quiet courage in places no one would ever see. Above, footsteps shifted again, this time closer to the stairwell. She pressed her back against the cold wall, rifle ready, her ears strained for even the faintest sound of alarm. Then a voice, soft, different, almost a whisper, "I hear something." Her stomach sank. She held her breath. The footsteps paused. A shadow fell across the stairwell opening. Light flashed briefly, someone's flashlight. She counted the heartbeats as they scanned, turned, moved on. Relief, fleeting but sharp, surged through her. She exhaled slowly, pressing a hand to her chest. The children exhaled too, tiny breaths trembling in the dark. Morales appeared next, quiet as a shadow, his eyes wide as he took in the room. I didn't hear anyone else down here," he said softly, almost to himself. She didn't answer, not yet. Instead, she guided him to the children, whispering instructions. "Help them out slowly, step by step. No one must see all at once." He nodded, understanding without question. There was trust here, built not from orders but from necessity. And yet, she felt the familiar ache in her chest, the ache of knowing that trust could be broken in an instant. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time was meaningless in that room. Every sound above, every creak, every whisper of wind became amplified in her mind. The children moved cautiously, Morales aiding, and she stayed alert, guarding, calculating, planning. And then the first light of dawn began to pierce the basement windows, thin and pale. The world outside seemed impossibly far away, impossibly normal. Her hands shook slightly as she guided the last child toward the small exit she had found. Outside, the morning was quiet, too quiet. The mountains loomed indifferent, imposing. The convoy had moved on, or so she assumed. The others had gone back, leaving her in the stillness of her own choices. She breathed in the cool air, letting it fill her lungs. She looked at the children, faces now pale in the daylight, and felt something shift inside her. Pride, yes. Relief, yes, but also a profound sadness. The world had not been kind to them, and the world would not pause to notice her courage. She was invisible again. The mission would report compound cleared, and the children who would report them. Who would speak their story? She pressed a hand to one girl's shoulder. "We're going to keep moving. Stay close." The girl's eyes met hers. Fear lingered, but so did trust, fragile and luminous as it had been in the dark. She led them into the mountains, away from the building, away from the men who would never understand. Every step forward was heavy, measured, careful. Her senses were alive, every rustle of leaves, every distant cry, every shadow a potential threat. Yet the children clung to her, trusting. In that moment, she understood something fundamental. Duty was never just about orders. Duty was about courage. Quiet, unspoken courage. Courage that did not require recognition, applause, or medals. Courage that existed only in the spaces where no one else could see. As the sun rose higher, scattering light across the jagged peaks, she felt a small flicker of hope. It was fragile, but it was there. The children had survived this night. They had survived her choices, and somehow, against everything, she had survived herself. Sometimes, she realized, the heaviest battles were the ones no one ever knew you fought. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Why did every step feel like crossing a line she could never return from? The mountains stretched before her like jagged teeth, harsh ridges slicing the pale morning sky. Each step was deliberate, careful, because one misstep could topple everything. Her life, the children, the fragile trust they clung to. The eldest child, a boy no older than 10, trailed close behind, eyes wide and alert. His small hands gripped the straps of the backpack she had found abandoned at the compound, a feeble attempt at carrying what little they had left. She glanced back, noting how every child moved differently. Some followed instinctively. Some hesitated at every rock or shadow, and some clung so tightly that she could feel their fear pulse through her own body. They had survived the first night, yes, but survival was only the beginning. Her mind wandered, as it always did when silence pressed heavy. She remembered her first deployment, how naive she had been, thinking courage was enough. She had learned quickly that courage was never enough. You needed precision, patience, and the willingness to carry burdens no one could see. Back then, she had been proud, almost foolishly so. Now, the weight in her chest reminded her that pride could kill you if you weren't careful. A sudden sound made her pause, a low whistle of wind through the rocks, or maybe a voice. She froze, scanning the peaks. The mountains played tricks on you, shadows dancing like phantoms, and her mind jumped at every flicker. The children mimicked her caution, tiny bodies pressed close, ears straining. Her thoughts flickered again. To her sister, waiting at home she hadn't seen in years. To the letters she had written but never sent, promises made to herself that she had already broken. She had thought joining the mission would fill the emptiness, give her purpose. And yet, here she was, haunted by silence, bearing witness to suffering that had no orders, no official protocol. "Keep moving," she whispered, not just to them but to herself. The sun climbed higher, and the thin mountain air burned her lungs with each careful step. She led the children along a narrow trail, one hand on her rifle, one hand gently guiding the youngest. Their steps were uneven, the path steep, the rocks slick with dew. Every sound carried miles. She flinched at every bird call, every snap of a twig. Hours passed, measured by the slow pace of frightened children and the relentless mountains. Hunger gnawed at them, but she rationed what little food she could find in her pack. Water scarce. The sun's heat began to press down, making the children whimper, sweat stinging their eyes. She had no plan, Not really. Only instinct, honed over years of missions that told her where danger lay, when to pause, when to move, when to push forward. Her training screamed at her constantly, reminding her that hesitation could mean death, not just for her but for them. At a narrow ridge she stopped. The wind cut like knives across her face. She squinted, scanning the valley below. Smoke curled from somewhere far in the distance. A settlement, maybe, or another compound, or worse, someone hunting for them. Her pulse quickened. The children sensed it, pressed close, fearful. She swallowed hard, forcing calm into her voice. "We'll be safe soon, I promise." Promises? She hated promises. One of the girls, the smallest, tugged at her sleeve. "Are we really going to be okay?" Her throat tightened. She knelt, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "We will be," she said softly. But inside a storm raged. How could she know? How could anyone know? Every step was a gamble, every decision a knife's edge. She remembered her mentor from her early days, a grizzled sergeant who had once told her, "You don't get to be right. You only get to act, and sometimes that's enough." Act, that was all she could do now. As they moved on, her mind drifted further back. To the first mission she had ever led, where she had lost someone. Her fault, she had always believed. The memory was sharp. The snap of gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke, the way her teammates' eyes had locked on hers for a fraction of a second before everything went dark. She had carried that silence like a wound ever since. It was no different now with these children, yet the stakes felt infinitely higher. A sudden shout from below snapped her back to the present. She spun, rifle up. Shadows moved among the rocks. Morales. He waved quickly, signaling them to follow. Relief surged, but she kept her guard. You never stopped guarding, not for a second. They descended cautiously, finding a small stream winding through the rocks. Water glimmered in the sunlight. Relief and hope flickered in the children's eyes, but she stayed alert. She let them drink, carefully rationing the water. She watched the reflection in the stream herself, tired, hollow-eyed, shoulders slumped. But the reflection had strength too, quiet, unwavering. They rested briefly. She allowed herself to breathe, letting the children nap against her, their heads on her shoulders, the weight of their trust grounding her. And then the wind changed. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make her ears twitch. The hairs on her neck rose. She motioned for the children to stay down, eyes scanning the ridges above. Movement, figures, shadows slipping between rocks, not just one, too many. She cursed under her breath. Had they been followed? Was this part of the original operation, or something worse? She whispered to Morales, "Positions now." The two of them moved silently, placing themselves between the children and the approaching threat. The wind carried the faint scent of gunpowder, of smoke from distant fires. They were not alone, never had been. The children clung to her, fear palpable. She glanced at their faces, each one a mirror of vulnerability and trust. She had no choice now, no hesitation. The shadows moved closer and she readied herself. Her mind raced, mapping escape routes, angles of fire, potential cover. But she also thought about the children. She couldn't let them see violence. Not yet. The first figure emerged, clearly armed, scanning the ridge. She held her breath, counting seconds, forcing the world to slow. Morales beside her, steady, a silent partner in a dance she had led countless times, but never with innocence in tow. Time stretched, the figure took another step, then another. She weighed every option, every risk, every life in her hands, and then she acted. A precise shot. Quick, clean. The figure froze, then crumpled silently. She motioned for Morales to move the children further down the ridge while she covered them. Another figure appeared, scanning, unaware. Another shot. Calm, deliberate, she didn't flinch. Not now. Not when the weight of so many lives pressed against her chest. The ridge emptied slowly, methodically. Shadows dissipated, the immediate threat neutralized. But her heart raced, and her hands shook, not from fear, but from the enormity of responsibility. The children were safe for now. But she knew this was only the beginning. The mountains held more secrets, more dangers, more choices she would have to make alone. As the sun climbed higher, warming their backs, she allowed herself a small, private moment. She closed her eyes, letting the wind brush her face. She thought about the faces of the children, their fragile trust, and the weight of silence she carried. Sometimes she realized the world did not notice the battles worth fighting. Sometimes courage was quiet, and sometimes dignity did not speak. It acted. She opened her eyes. The children looked to her, expectant, fragile, alive. She swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a smile. "Come on," she whispered. "We keep moving, one step at a time." And so they moved, through jagged ridges, across precarious cliffs, through streams that cut like knives through the rocks. Every step forward was a victory, fragile, tentative, but real. Every step forward was a promise she made silently, to herself, to them, and to the ghosts she carried from missions long past. The mountains did not care about courage. They did not care about sacrifice, but she did. And that made all the difference. Why did the world always demand choice at the exact moment your heart screamed no? The ridge ended abruptly, plunging into a narrow gorge carved by centuries of ice and wind. The children clung to her skirts of jacket and sleeves, fingers intertwined with hers, faces pale with exhaustion and fear. Morale scanned ahead, rifle raised, eyes sharp. Silence pressed down like a living thing, yet it was the kind of silence that shouted at her, warning, accusing, reminding. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Every muscle ached from the climb. Every step forward carried the weight of responsibility. One wrong move and the lives she had vowed to protect could vanish in an instant. The mountains were beautiful in their cruelty. Jagged edges catching sunlight, shadows stretching long and thin, streams cutting into stone like precise scars. Yet she could not admire. Not now. Not when the children's eyes followed her every step, waiting for her to decide. "Almost there," she whispered, more to herself than to them. The words felt hollow. Almost there. How many times had she thought that? How many times had she believed safety was just around the next bend, only to find another trap, another threat, another impossible choice? Her mind drifted to her earliest missions. She remembered the first time she had disobeyed an order. It had been a simple reconnaissance, a single target, nothing more. Yet when she saw a civilian in the wrong place at the wrong time, she had chosen to act on instinct instead of protocol. That single choice had haunted her for years. The fallout had been quiet, contained, but it had left a scar deeper than any bullet ever could. She carried that scar now, folded into the silence of her own conscience, a constant reminder that right and wrong were never as simple as commands on paper. A sudden sound yanked her back into the present, a low growl from behind. She froze. The children did too, tiny bodies pressed into hers. Her rifle swung, flashlight slicing through shadows. Two wolves, maybe more, emerged from the underbrush. Lean, hungry, teeth bared, eyes glinting in the sunlight. Morales cursed softly under his breath. "Great, wolves, just what we needed." She didn't flinch. She knew how to handle them. Slow movements, direct eye contact, dominance. She shifted, blocking the children with her body, keeping herself between predator and prey. The wolves circled, tense, muscles coiled. She whispered, "Stay calm, don't scream, don't move unless I say so." The tension stretched seconds into eternities. Her finger hovered on the trigger, but she didn't fire. The creatures sensed her determination, her focus. Slowly, deliberately, they retreated back into the shadows, disappearing as silently as they had appeared. Her chest heaved. She exhaled slowly, letting the moment pass. The children clung closer now, terror etched deep into their small faces. She pressed her hand to the youngest's back, whispering reassurance, though her own heartbeat thundered like war drums in her chest. Hours later, when the sun had climbed higher, she led them into a narrow copse of trees at the gorge's base. Here, at least, they could rest without being seen from above. She laid the children down on blankets she had scavenged from her pack. They ate what little rations remained. "Why didn't you call for help?" the eldest boy asked suddenly, voice small but piercing. She paused, the question hung in the air like smoke. Morales didn't answer. The children waited. Her throat tightened. Because sometimes the people who are supposed to help won't see what needs saving, she said finally, choosing her words carefully. And sometimes you have to do it yourself. The boy's eyes widened, understanding, yet fear lingered. He didn't ask more. Children didn't need explanations they couldn't carry. They only needed action. Later, when they had eaten and the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, she took watch. Morales slept beside the children, exhaustion finally claiming him. She sat on a rock, rifle across her lap, staring at the horizon, thinking of the lives that had led her here. Her mind returned to the compound. The screams she had not heard, the children she had found, the choices she had made in darkness. How many missions had begun with orders and ended in moral chaos? How many times had she acted without anyone understanding why? She remembered her parents' faces in faded photographs tucked into a notebook she carried in her pack. Her mother, stern but proud. Her father, quiet, always asking the wrong questions. She had run from their expectations, only to find herself in missions that demanded everything she had and more. Yet somehow here, she realized, she was exactly where she was meant to be, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, acting where no one else would. Night fell. The forest shifted with sound, owls calling, leaves rustling, distant predators moving in rhythm with the darkness. She lit a small fire, careful to keep it low. The children huddled together, the warmth easing some of their fear, though exhaustion pulled their eyelids down. Morales stirred. "Do you ever think about what happens when it's all over?" he asked quietly, as if testing her. She didn't answer immediately. There was no easy answer. She had survived, yes, but the cost had been internal, invisible. "I think the world moves on. It always does. We just have to live with what we did in the meantime." He nodded. He didn't press further. Some questions, she realized, didn't need answers. They only needed acknowledgement. The night stretched on, quiet but heavy. Her senses never truly rested. She listened to the children's breathing, their soft whimpers, the creak of trees swaying in the wind. Every sound mattered. Every shadow carried potential threat. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew that danger was not over, not by a long shot. Hours later, as the first pale light of dawn brushed the treetops, they continued their trek. The children were slow, weary, but resilient. Her heart swelled with both pride and dread. Each step forward was a victory, but each step forward was also closer to potential discovery, confrontation, or worse. She remembered the sergeant's words again. "You only get to act, and sometimes that's enough." It was all she had left: action, silence, determination. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a small village nestled at the base of the mountains. Smoke curled from chimneys. The air smelled of earth and wood, of life continuing despite chaos. She studied it carefully, weighing risks. Approach too boldly and they would be seen. Approach too timidly and they would never reach safety. She whispered to Morales, "We'll wait for nightfall, then we move in." He nodded. "And if they see us?" Her eyes hardened. "Then we make them think we belong, we survive, that's all that matters." They rested in the trees, hidden from view, the children dozing intermittently, exhausted. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, staring at the horizon, imagining home, imagining a life that might never exist for her again. The mountains were silent witnesses. They had seen countless lives lost, countless choices made, countless heroes unnoticed. She was just another name, another shadow. And yet, for these children, she was the world. Sometimes, she realized, the world didn't notice the quiet acts that mattered most. Sometimes, the people who mattered the most didn't even know the faces of those who saved them. But she did, she always would. As the sun began its slow descent, she checked the children again, adjusted packs, whispered reassurances. The path ahead was dangerous, uncertain, but she had learned long ago that certainty was a luxury she could not afford. She focused on the next step, the next ridge, the next safe place. Each decision measured, deliberate, filled with the weight of responsibility. Her mind lingered on the children's faces, their trust fragile but unwavering. She could not fail them. Not now, not ever. And in that silence she understood the truth that had guided her life through countless missions. Sometimes courage is quiet. Sometimes dignity does not speak. It simply acts. She drew a deep breath, tightened her grip on the rifle, and led them forward, one step at a time, through a world that would never notice, through dangers they could not imagine, through the mountains that held their fates in jagged hands. And she kept moving. Why did the air suddenly feel heavier, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath? The children trudged behind her, each step slower than the last. Their small bodies were coated in dirt and sweat, hair tangled, clothing torn from weeks of neglect. Morales walked beside her, silent now, letting her lead. She did not need his voice. The responsibility rested entirely on her shoulders, and she carried it with the familiar weight of inevitability. Ahead, the village shimmered in the heat haze of late afternoon. Smoke from chimneys wove upward, carrying the faint scent of bread and wood fire. Life continued as though the world outside these mountains didn't exist, or maybe it just didn't care. She paused, scanning the ridge above. Her eyes, trained for threats, saw shapes moving far too deliberately, shadows slipping along the tree line, figures carrying backpacks, rifles slung loosely over shoulders. Human. Her pulse quickened, but she forced calm into every movement. She crouched, motioning the children closer. Morales mirrored her stance. Silence. Watch. Wait. The intruders were too far to see clearly, but they were coming, and they were coming for them. Her mind flickered to the mission briefing months ago when she had been dismissed at the table. Orders, objectives, coordinates. No one had mentioned what to do if the rules didn't apply, if humanity demanded a choice that didn't appear in the margins of a classified document. She had learned the answer that night in the basement. She acted. She saved. She survived. And now she had to act again. The first figure broke from the tree line, rifle raised. Her fingers tightened on her own weapon, her instincts singing. But then she saw the hesitation in his step, the way he glanced back over his shoulder as if someone had warned him not to fire. Her mind raced. She could fight them, yes. She could take them down. But with the children exposed, that choice carried consequences she could not risk. Instead, she whispered to Morales, "Through the valley, quickly. Stay low, don't look back." The children obeyed, small bodies pressed to hers and Morales's, trusting, fragile. They moved like ghosts across the rocky path, silent and deliberate. Behind them, shouts rose, confusion, frustration, anger. But she didn't turn. Every step carried them further from immediate danger but closer to exhaustion. Hours passed. The valley widened and she found cover behind a rocky outcrop. The children collapsed, panting, limbs trembling. She let herself sit for a moment, letting the sun warm her back, letting the wind dry the sweat on her neck. Her mind wandered to the past again. Her first sniper mission, years ago, in a country she barely remembered now. A small village, innocents caught in the crossfire, orders that didn't match the reality on the ground. She had made a choice then, too. One that had saved lives, yes, but at a personal cost she carried like a wound hidden beneath her uniform. That memory had forged her into the operative she had become, an instrument of precision and patience. And now, that same resolve guided her again. "Are we safe?" the eldest boy asked, voice trembling. She knelt before him, hands on his shoulders. "Not yet, but we're closer than before." Her voice was calm, but inside her heart pounded like war drums. Night fell. She kept them moving under cover of darkness, winding through narrow paths, avoiding lights from nearby settlements. She kept the children close, whispering directions, reassuring them with soft touches and gentle words. Every shadow was a threat. Every rustle of leaves made her flinch. She had never felt the weight of vulnerability so sharply, so personally. Morales moved beside her, eyes scanning, rifle ready. She knew he was exhausted, yet he continued to cover her and the children without complaint. They had become a silent team, their communication unspoken, built on shared purpose and trust. They reached an abandoned barn by a small stream, the kind of place that smelled of hay and damp wood. She ushered the children inside, barricading the doors with old planks. She checked each of them carefully, bruises, cuts, dehydration. There were no smiles, no laughter, only survival. She allowed herself a brief glance outside into the cold night. Stars burned above, indifferent, beautiful, and unyielding. The mountains had been witness to countless lives, countless decisions, countless acts of courage. She wondered if anyone had noticed those acts. Her thoughts returned to the children. Their faces were etched into her memory now. She could never unsee them, never forget the weight of their trust. And that was what drove her forward, the knowledge that in a world that often ignored the quiet battles, these lives depended on her action, her courage, her choices. Suddenly a sound, wood creaking. A shadow moved across the moonlit floor outside. She froze, heart hammering. "Stay down," she whispered to the children. Morales raised his rifle, eyes sharp. A man stepped into the barn doorway, rifle slung but hand raised in a gesture of surrender. His eyes were wide, untrusting but not hostile. He spoke quickly, softly. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. You need help." Her mind raced. Could she trust him? Did she have the luxury of trust? Every instinct screamed caution. Every past mission reminded her that trust could be a death sentence. Yet something in his posture and the careful way he kept distance from the children suggested he was telling the truth. She kept her rifle raised, voice steady. "Who are you?" "My name is Cade," he said. "I know a safe place, a way out of these mountains, but we have to move before dawn. Others, they're still searching." Morales glanced at her, uncertainty written across his face. She studied Cade, noting the scars on his hands, the weariness in his eyes. He had been through this world too. He understood fear. He understood survival. Finally, she lowered her rifle slightly. "We move together. One step wrong and we don't make it." Cade nodded, understood. The children stirred, sensing the tension but not the danger. She guided them close, her body a protective wall, instincts honed to anticipate every movement. Every rustle outside, every whisper of wind, every snap of a twig could mean death. But she could not falter. They moved as one, silent through the night. The forest pressed in, shadows twisting into shapes that seemed to watch them, shapes that seemed to follow. Yet she led them forward with determination, the knowledge that every step, every choice, every heartbeat was hers to command. Hours later, when dawn brushed pale light across the treetops, they found a hidden path leading to a small cave. It was safe, temporary, but enough to rest. The children collapsed against her and Morales, exhaustion pulling their limbs into sleep. She sat against the cave wall, rifle across her knees, staring at the first light of day. Her thoughts drifted again, unbidden. How many missions had started with orders, only to become tests of morality, courage, and choice? How many lives had she touched in silence, unseen, unacknowledged? And yet here, in this moment, she felt the weight of meaning. Not in accolades, not in recognition, not in medals or reports, but in the trust of these children, fragile and luminous, in the knowledge that she had acted when no one else could. Sometimes, she realized, the greatest acts of courage were invisible. Sometimes the world would never notice. And yet, that did not make them any less important. As the sun climbed higher, warming her face, she allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The mountains stretched endlessly around them, indifferent, beautiful, dangerous. She had survived so far, yes, but survival was never guaranteed, not for her, not for the children. She pressed a hand to her forehead, whispering a silent promise. She would not fail them, not now, not ever. And with that promise she rose, gathering the children and morals, moving onward into the uncertain world beyond the mountains. Every step forward was a choice, deliberate and necessary, and every choice was a testament to courage, resilience, and the quiet power of dignity in action. Sometimes courage didn't announce itself. Sometimes it existed only in the quiet moments between decisions, in the silences that followed each act of protection, each act of sacrifice. And sometimes it was enough. She moved and the children followed, shadows and light weaving together in the mountains, carrying with them the fragile hope that action, even in silence, could still save lives. Why did fear sometimes feel heavier than the rifle in her hands? The cave was barely more than a hollowed-out ridge, its entrance disguised by overhanging rocks and tangled vines. The children huddled close, their small bodies pressed together for warmth, exhaustion finally pulling their limbs into fragile sleep. Morales sat nearby, eyes scanning the shadows, rifle resting across his knees. She, however, could not rest. Her mind replayed every decision from the past few days. Each step had been calculated, each choice weighed against 1,000 possibilities, each heartbeat a reminder that one mistake could undo everything. She thought of the first child she had found, trembling in the basement, and of the tiny hands now clutching hers as she led them through the mountains. Each life was a responsibility, a tether to reality she could never ignore. Cade moved silently through the cave, checking their meager supplies, ensuring they were safe for the day. His presence was steady, a quiet reassurance amidst chaos, yet she couldn't shake the nagging doubt in her chest. Trust was a luxury, and she had learned too well that one wrong move could be fatal. The sunlight filtered faintly through the cave entrance, casting long shadows across the walls. She traced the shapes absent-mindedly, thinking about the missions that had shaped her. The first sniper shot she took, the first time she disobeyed orders to save an innocent, the first time she realized that courage was not about accolades, but about silent action. A rustle outside snapped her attention. Every muscle tensed. She motioned for the children to stay down, rifle raised, eyes scanning the tree line. Morales moved to her side. A man stepped cautiously into the opening, hands raised, eyes wide. His uniform was tattered, his face marked by exhaustion and fear. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice low but firm. "My name is Elias," he said quickly. I'm trying to survive like you. There are people who aren't friendly. I can help you if you trust me." Trust. The word felt like a blade on her tongue. She had trusted before, and it had cost lives. Yet something in Elias' demeanor suggested honesty, or at least desperation, which was a language she understood well. She lowered her rifle slightly but kept her stance defensive. "We move at nightfall. Until then, you stay here. One wrong step and you're on your own." Elias nodded. Relief flickered across his face, but she saw fear lurking just beneath. He understood the rules of this world, the silent laws she had learned to obey instinctively. Hours crawled by. She kept watch while Morales and Cade rested near the children. Her mind wandered again, unbidden, to memories she had tried to bury. The first mission she had led solo, the faces of innocents she had failed to save, the letters she had written to her family but never sent. Every memory carried a weight she could not shake, and yet somehow it gave her strength. Strength to act when others hesitated. Strength to lead when others faltered. Night fell. Shadows deepened, the forest around them alive with unseen movement. She gathered the children, checking their packs, ensuring they were as ready as they could be. Cade and Elias flanked her, their movements silent, trained, deliberate. They moved through the darkness, careful to avoid patrols and settlements. Each step was a negotiation with survival, a silent promise to protect those who depended on her. She guided them along narrow paths, across streams, over rocky ledges. Every sound carried danger, yet she pressed forward, relentless, focused, unwavering. Halfway through their journey, they encountered a patrol. 3 figures, armed, moving deliberately, scanning the area. The children froze, eyes wide, and she instinctively moved to shield them. Morales whispered, "We can't fight them head-on." She nodded, scanning the terrain. There was a narrow ravine to their left, rocks jutting out, offering cover. She signaled for them to move quietly, step by step, hearts pounding, breaths held. The patrol passed, oblivious to their presence. She exhaled slowly, relief mingling with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The children had not yet seen violence firsthand, and she intended to keep it that way for as long as possible. As they continued, Cade spoke quietly. "There's a village ahead, a place where you can rest safely, but it's not free of danger. You'll have to be careful." She nodded, already calculating the risks, the paths, the angles of approach. Her mind raced through scenarios, contingencies, escape routes. Every step forward was a calculated decision, every breath measured. When they reached the outskirts of the village, she crouched behind a cluster of trees, scanning for signs of life. Smoke from chimneys, faint voices, the flicker of lanterns, people, families, ordinary life. A world that had continued without them, indifferent, yet offering a fragile thread of hope. She guided them to the edge, careful not to be seen. The children huddled close, trembling but trusting her implicitly. She whispered softly, "Almost there, just a little further." The village elder spotted them first. An old man leaning on a cane, eyes sharp despite age. He raised a hand in greeting, cautious but welcoming. She assessed quickly. He was alone, likely a scout, not a threat. She nodded subtly, signaling the group to move forward. Inside the village, they found temporary refuge. The children were given food and blankets, and she allowed herself a rare moment of rest. Her muscles ached, her mind raced, yet she felt a flicker of accomplishment. They had survived another leg of the journey. But she knew this peace was fragile. The threat of discovery still lingered, shadows of danger she could not yet see. Her training reminded her that vigilance was never optional, and her heart reminded her why she could not falter. Not now, not ever. That night she sat outside the small hut where the children slept, looking at the stars. She thought of the missions that had brought her here, the choices she had made in darkness, the lives she had touched and failed to touch. Each memory was a lesson, a warning, a reminder that courage existed not in accolades but in silent, deliberate action. She pressed a hand to her chest, whispering a promise to herself and to those who depended on her. "I will not fail you." And in the quiet night she understood a truth she had always known but had never fully accepted. Sometimes the hardest battles were invisible. Sometimes the weight of responsibility was greater than any weapon she could carry. And sometimes survival was not enough. Sometimes it was the courage to act, the willingness to protect, the ability to move forward despite fear that defined a life worth living. Dawn came slowly. She rose, gathering her strength, checking on the children, preparing for the next stage of their journey. The mountains beyond awaited, jagged and indifferent, yet offering the path to freedom. She would lead them, protect them, endure whatever came. Because duty was not written in orders. It was etched in the silence of those she saved. And that silence, she knew, spoke louder than any gunshot, louder than any command, louder than the world itself. Why did the mountains feel alive tonight, as if every rock and shadow were watching? The village lay behind them now, faint lanterns disappearing into the distance. The children trudged wearily, each step a struggle, yet they kept moving because she kept moving. Morales flanked the rear, rifle sweeping the darkness, eyes scanning every curve of the trail. Cade led ahead, alert and silent as though he, too, understood the fragile thread of trust connecting them all. She pressed forward, rifle in hand, senses sharpened to the tiniest movement. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, every shift in the wind was a potential threat. Her mind raced through contingencies, escape routes, worst-case scenarios. Every mission she had ever undertaken had taught her one immutable truth. You could never predict the danger. You could only prepare to act. The children whispered questions in hushed tones. Are they following us? Will we be safe? Why does it have to be like this? Her heart tightened. She crouched low, pulling them close, brushing dirt from their faces. "We'll be safe," she whispered, though the words felt like a fragile hope rather than certainty. "We just have to keep moving." The forest pressed in around them, shadows deepening, branches scraping across their clothing. And then she heard it, a faint snapping sound, deliberate, echoing through the trees. "Someone's out there," she muttered, voice taut. Morale stiffened beside her, scanning the darkness. The pursuit had begun. Figures emerged, armed, methodical, relentless. They had been tracking them all along. She counted 6, maybe more, each movement precise, each shadow blending with the night. Fear flickered in the children's eyes, and she pressed a hand to their shoulders, forcing herself to radiate calm she did not feel. She whispered to Morales and Cade, "We split. Diversion, then regroup. Move quickly." They obeyed without hesitation. Years of training, countless missions, had forged them into silent instruments of survival. The children followed instinctively, trusting her implicitly. Every step was a negotiation with death. Every heartbeat carried weight beyond measurement. The first figure spotted them, rifle raised. She acted instinctively, precise, deliberate. A shot rang out, silent to the children, deadly to the target. The figure fell, and the others froze. She motioned for the group to move, leading them along a narrow ridge where the shadows offered cover. Her mind raced. They had no margin for error. Every path, every tree, every stone could be a trap. And yet the children relied on her, their fragile trust a beacon in the darkness. Hours passed in tense silence. The pursuit never relented. Every step brought new dangers, unstable rocks, steep cliffs, treacherous streams. Each obstacle tested their endurance, their resolve, their courage. She thought of the first mission she had ever led alone, when a single choice had determined life or death. She had learned then that courage was quiet, that dignity existed in action, not accolades. Every mission since had reinforced that lesson. And now, with these children depending on her, the stakes had never felt higher. The eldest boy stumbled, twisting his ankle on a hidden root. He cried out softly, fear and pain mingling in his voice. She dropped to his level, checking the injury. It was not broken, but he could not move quickly. She looked at Morales and Cade, who both understood instantly. There was no time for hesitation. She hoisted the boy onto her back, balancing him carefully, and continued forward. Every step became heavier, more deliberate. The weight was not just physical, it was moral, emotional, the burden of responsibility pressing against her chest like a living thing. The pursuit grew more aggressive. Shots rang out in the distance, echoes bouncing through the mountains. Shadows flitted through trees. Her pulse raced, but she did not falter. Every movement was precise, every decision calculated, every breath controlled. She thought of the children, their trust unwavering, their hope fragile but real. She could not fail them. Not now, not ever. Hours later, as dawn began to touch the mountain tops, they reached a plateau overlooking a small, hidden valley. Smoke rose from a distant chimney, a settlement, abandoned or perhaps a safe haven. She could not be sure, but it was the first sign of civilization they had seen in days. She crouched, scanning the terrain. The valley offered cover, resources, and potential safety, but it also carried unknown risks. She weighed the options carefully, calculating paths, angles, escape routes. Every choice mattered. Every step could mean life or death. She turned to the group. "We move carefully, stick to the shadows, don't separate. We reach the valley, we rest, we plan. One mistake and it's over." The children nodded, understanding more than their years should allow. They had learned trust in the harshest way, and they clung to it. The descent into the valley was slow, deliberate. Every sound carried weight. Every movement required caution. She led the children, protecting them with her body, her instincts, her resolve. Halfway down, Morales whispered, "They're gaining on us, faster." She didn't answer. There was no room for panic. Only action, only precision, only determination. She quickened her pace, careful to keep the children safe. Each step became a testament to endurance, to courage, to the silent power of dignity in action. Suddenly, a figure appeared ahead, a young man, armed, alert, but not immediately hostile. He raised his hand slowly, signaling for them to halt. She froze, assessing. "Who are you?" she demanded, voice steady. "My name is Jaren," he said quickly. "I've been tracking the same people after you. They won't stop. But there's a path through the old tunnels. It's dangerous, yes, but it's our best chance." Her instinct screamed caution. Trust could be lethal, and yet he carried no aggression, only knowledge. She studied him, weighing risk against necessity. She could sense honesty, desperation, understanding. Finally, she lowered her rifle slightly. "Lead the way. One wrong step and you're on your own." Jaren nodded, understood. They moved quickly, descending toward the tunnels. The path was treacherous, narrow cliffs, jagged rocks, hidden pitfalls. Every step required vigilance. The children followed, exhausted but trusting, fragile, resilient. The entrance to the tunnels appeared like a scar in the mountainside. Darkness loomed. She checked her surroundings carefully, scanning for traps or ambushes. None were apparent. She guided the group inside, moving as one, shadows and light blending seamlessly. Inside, the air was damp, cold, and heavy. Every sound echoed: footsteps, whispers, distant water. She led the children, keeping them close, signaling Morales, Cade, and Jaren. Every step forward was calculated, deliberate, silent. Hours passed. The tunnels twisted, turned, descended, ascended. Every corner held potential danger. Every sound could be pursuit, predator, threat. Yet she moved forward, relentless, determined, unwavering. Finally, they emerged into a hidden valley, sunlight breaking through clouds. Safe, or at least safer. The children gasped, relief mingling with awe. Morales exhaled, tension finally easing. Cade and Jaren exchanged nods, respect and trust unspoken but palpable. She allowed herself a moment, pressing a hand to her forehead, feeling the sun's warmth on her face. She thought of the children, of the lives she had protected, of the choices that had defined her existence. Every mission, every risk, every sacrifice had led here. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Duty was not written in orders. Courage did not demand recognition. Dignity existed in action, in silent protection, in the relentless commitment to those who relied on you. The children smiled, small but genuine, and she felt a flicker of hope. A fragile, beautiful hope that perhaps in this world of shadows and fear, action mattered more than acknowledgement, that courage could survive even in silence. She led them forward into the hidden valley, each step a testament to resilience, to strength, to the quiet, unwavering power of duty lived in action rather than words. And as the sun rose higher, illuminating their path, she knew one truth with clarity. The world may never notice, the world may never understand, but she had acted, and sometimes that was enough. Why did the final step feel heavier than the first? The hidden valley stretched before them like a secret cradled by the mountains. Sunlight warmed the earth, casting long shadows across wildflowers and streams. The children stumbled forward, faces streaked with dirt and fatigue, but their eyes shone with cautious hope. Morales, Cade, and Jaren flanked her, vigilant even in the brief promise of safety. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every choice she had made. Every step across the mountains, every night spent in hiding, every quiet act of courage, it had all led here. And yet, the journey was not over, not fully. Danger still lingered beyond the valley, beyond the mountains, in a world that rarely acknowledged silent heroes. She knelt, brushing dirt from the youngest child's hair. "We're almost safe," she whispered, though she could not guarantee it. Not yet. Survival was never certain, and trust remained a fragile thing. The group moved slowly toward a cluster of abandoned cottages at the valley's edge. Their structure offered temporary shelter, food stored in hidden caches, and a semblance of safety. It was modest, imperfect, but it was enough. For now. She allowed herself a moment to scan the horizon, letting her eyes linger on the sun-drenched peaks. Memories rushed through her, missions passed, lives saved, lives lost, choices made in the dark. She saw the faces of those she had failed, the civilians she could not reach, the colleagues who had fallen because of orders she had questioned or ignored. The weight pressed on her chest, but she carried it with resolve, not regret. Inside the cottages, she settled the children, ensuring they had water, blankets, and food. Their tiny bodies were exhausted, yet their trust in her remained unwavering. She felt a deep, almost painful pride. These lives depended on her, and she had delivered them to safety, however temporary it might be. Morales approached, sitting beside her. "You did it," he said softly, voice tinged with awe and relief. "They're safe, all of them." She shook her head slightly. "We did it," she corrected. Every mission, every decision, every act of courage had been collective. She had led, yes, but it was their combined strength, Morales's vigilance, Cade's knowledge, Jaren's guidance, that had brought them here. The children's resilience, too, had carried them forward. Night fell again, stars glittering above the valley like distant witnesses. She sat outside, rifle across her knees, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. The mountains were silent now, indifferent, yet filled with history, memory, and the echoes of every life that had passed through them. Her mind wandered back to the first mission she had ever led alone, when a single choice had determined life or death. She remembered the fear, the uncertainty, the weight of responsibility. She had learned then that courage was quiet, dignity existed in action, and survival was never guaranteed. She had carried those lessons through every mission since, each act of silent heroism reinforcing her understanding of duty. A faint sound drew her attention, a whisper of movement beyond the cottages. She tensed, rifle raised, ready for threat. But it was only a fox, sleek and cautious, passing through the shadows. She allowed herself a small, wry smile. Even the smallest signs of life were worth noticing after the silence of danger and loss. Cade joined her, sitting quietly. "You've changed them," he said, nodding toward the cottages. "Not just saved them, you've given them hope." Her chest tightened. "Hope is fragile," she said softly, "but sometimes it's all that keeps people moving forward." They sat in silence, letting the night pass, each lost in thought. Memories, fears, hopes, all mingling in the quiet. She thought of her family, her parents' faces in faded photographs, the letters she had never sent. She thought of missions that had tested her, of choices that had haunted her, of courage that had come without recognition. And she realized finally that this was what mattered. Not orders, not medals, not reports, not acknowledgement. It was the lives saved, the trust earned, the quiet dignity in action. It was the children who slept safely because she had acted when no one else could. Morning arrived slowly, painting the valley in gold and soft shadows. The children stirred, their small faces blinking open to the light. She knelt beside them, brushing hair from their eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility shift toward hope. Morales gathered the remaining supplies. Cade and Jaren prepared for the journey ahead. She stood, rifle slung over her shoulder, scanning the horizon one last time. The mountains loomed, indifferent and eternal. Beyond them the world awaited, chaotic, unforgiving, yet full of potential for action, for courage, for silent heroism. She gathered the children, signaling them forward. Every step was deliberate, careful, measured. Every step carried the lessons of the journey, the weight of responsibility, the silent affirmation of dignity in action. As they moved toward the edge of the valley, she glanced back once, letting her eyes linger on the mountains that had tested them, shaped them, and witnessed their journey. She felt a deep, quiet reverence for the challenges, for the choices, for the resilience of those who had survived, and for the courage it took to act when no one was watching. The final step into the wider world was slow, deliberate. Each child, each ally, each heartbeat carried the imprint of her silent heroism. She understood now that courage was not a spectacle, dignity was not a declaration, and heroism was not measured in applause. It existed in action, in protection, in the relentless pursuit of life and hope in the face of uncertainty. She let the children lead the way, holding their hands lightly, her presence a shield and a guide. The world beyond the valley stretched vast and unpredictable, yet for the first time she felt a fragile sense of peace. Sometimes, she realized, the acts that mattered most were invisible. Sometimes, the people who mattered most would never know the names of those who saved them. And yet, that did not make the deeds any less significant. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the quiet beat of endurance, the invisible pulse of courage, the unspoken truth of responsibility. Duty was not written in orders. It was etched in the silence of those who survived because of action taken when no one was watching. As the sun climbed higher, warming the earth and illuminating their path, she led them forward, each step a testament to resilience, strength, and the quiet, unwavering power of choice. And in the stillness of that moment, surrounded by the lives she had protected, she understood the ultimate truth of her journey. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the past, the relief of the present, and the hope for the future settle into a single, profound calm. The children laughed quietly, their voices soft but alive. Morales, Cade, and Jaren exchanged glances, knowing the journey had changed them all. And she walked on, silent, steadfast, carrying with her the unspoken victories of countless missions, the quiet courage of invisible battles, and the enduring truth that action, compassion, and relentless responsibility were the real measure of a hero. The mountains watched. The wind carried stories of survival and courage, and somewhere deep in the valleys of memory and choice, she knew that even if the world forgot, she, and the lives she had saved, would remember.